and welcome to Ohio EPA's second virtual information session regarding future Ohio water and wastewater infrastructure funding. My name is Jessica Langdon, and I'm a legislative liaison and community outreach coordinator for Ohio EPA. I will be moderating today's meeting. With me is also from the agency, Jerry Rao, our Ohio EPA's Deputy Director of Infrastructure Funding, John Bernstein, Ohio EPA's Chief of Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance, also commonly known as DEFA, Katie Courtwright, Assistant Chief of DEFA, Heidi Griesmer, our Deputy Director of Communications, and Mary McCarran, Ohio EPA's Manager of Public Involvement. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We will have a brief overview of what we covered in our first infrastructure webinar in February. And if you are returning to us, thank you for joining us again. We are pleased to have some new announcements for you today. In a minute, Jerry and John will both be presenting. Jerry oversees all of our water and wastewater infrastructure funding at Ohio EPA and has been with the agency for over 30 years. John's division is focused on helping communities and businesses with their environmental needs, including financial assistance. John has been with the agency for 14 years. Before we get started, I'd like to go ahead and go over a few items to help our online participants navigate the GoTo platform. On the slide here, you will see an example screenshot of your attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer desktop on the right-hand side of your screen. For this meeting, you are listening in using your computer audio. If you're having sound issues or your slides stop advancing, try refreshing your browser. If that doesn't work, try logging off and logging back in. Please submit questions by clicking on the question mark icon and typing them into the questions pane on your attendee interface. At the end of the presentation, questions that were submitted online will be read aloud for the whole audience to hear, and Jerry and John will go ahead and answer those. You can also click on the document icon to view included handouts for this meeting. I would also like to note that we are recording this session, and we will have that broadcast after its conclusion. Now I would like to go ahead and hand it over to Jerry for his presentation.
Thanks, Jessica. We are super glad to be with you all today, this morning. I took a quick look at our registration the other day, and I was just really thrilled to see that we had hundreds and hundreds of people signed up, and the audience here that you all are participating in is really quite diverse and includes local officials from large communities and small communities. We've got public water systems, we have water and sewer districts, we have nonprofit groups and advocacy groups. We have some staff folks from other state agencies and from the Ohio General Assembly and even staff people from Congress that are attending. There's people that are participating today that may even be from out of state and are tuning in to listen to what Ohio EPA has to say about the infrastructure bill. So we're super excited that you're here. The audience that is mostly comprised of local government, but not exclusively. You know, as I mentioned, we have folks that are participating from local health districts, and we have partners from local development districts and regional planning. Our good associates and friends from the Rural Community Assistance Program, RCAP, and Ohio Rural Water are in as well. So we're just delighted, absolutely delighted that you all took a little bit of your time to be with us today. And our intent today is to inform and engage, and we really do want to do both of those things. So we want to try to give you some updated information on where we are. But this is also part of a long-term process for engaging with you and really want to get your thoughts and ideas. So I think you're going to see as we move through the webinar and get towards the end that we really are hoping for a robust question and answer session as we had before. So here's our agenda. We've kind of walked through the introductions, and the way that we have designed this morning's program is that we want to do some review of of information that we previously shared with folks, and then we want to share some new information. Then we'll work forward from that and start talking with you about some of the thoughts that we have, kind of preliminary thoughts as far as implementation and some of the timelines that we're looking at. We want to make sure that we give you the kind of the next steps and like how you all can stay engaged, and then we'll bridge over to a question and answer session. So there's going to be a little bit of this that's going to be review for those of you that attended our first webinar, which was February 3rd. Now 2.5 months later, we've got some new information to share with you, and we've got some thoughts on kind of where we are. We've got a better feel for the timeline. So I think it'll be a good meeting, and we really are looking forward to it. And we're really glad that you're here with us. So the format that we're going to use today, we've got a PowerPoint, of course. We've got about somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 slides. And John Bernstein and I are going to kind of take turns in covering some of the material. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to John. And John is going to give a brief overview of the SRF programs. Let's take it away, John.
All right, great. Thank you, Jerry. Welcome back to those of you that did tune in back in February, and to those of you joining us now. During the last webinar, I think we had an ice storm, during the webinar. So happy it's spring. We've got sunshine here in Columbus, and hope you have a nice day too, wherever you're located. So just to start, we're going to kind of do a little remedial review of what we covered last time. So, maybe going over some of the foundation of our programs. So kind of beginning with our state revolving fund programs. What are they? Every state in the country has an SRF program, state revolving fund, or SRF. In Ohio, we've got two, one for wastewater, which is called the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. In Ohio, it's the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund. And then for drinking water, we've got, also known as DWSRF, we've got the Water Supply Revolving Loan Account. Both these programs are operated through Ohio EPA in coordination with our partners in Ohio EPA, in our Division of Drinking and Groundwater, as well as the Division of Surface Water. And we operate these programs in collaboration with the Ohio Water Development Authority. We like to refer to them as our banker, but these two programs are well established. We'll go over a little bit of the history here in a second, but definitely for clean water, we think we handle majority of the wastewater infrastructure funding in the state. And likewise, the drinking water program has really been growing a lot over the last couple of years. So lots of opportunities for public water systems, as well as publicly owned treatment works for funding. Okay, so background here, we've got two columns for the WPCLF and for the WSRLA. So the clean water, we'll start there on the left column. It's been around for about 35 years. So started in 1987 through the Clean Water Act, authorized by Congress. And our first loans at Ohio EPA were in 1989. So we just crossed the $11 billion mark in assistance to our wastewater utilities across the state. So pretty impressive number. And through the program, we've received about $2.5 billion in capitalization from US EPA. And to match that, we provided state match through bonds of about $500 million. And, we have a capacity that this is reviewed each and every year. How much can we loan out? These programs are designed to be maintained in perpetuity. Even if these capitalization grants are discontinued, we can still continue to make monies available to our borrowers. So our capacity now for clean water programs about $700 million a year. And we've gone up to probably about $1 billion a year. So some years will be lower than that, and some years will be higher. So jumping over to the right-hand column, the drinking water program, the WSRLA, it's a little younger, smaller program. It's been in existence for about 25 years. And, the number looks a little lower. It's a smaller program, but it's ramping up pretty quickly. So we just crossed the $2 billion threshold, which is a pretty momentous occasion for us. And likewise, we've received federal capitalization to the tune of about $674 million, with state match of about $135 million. Likewise, our capacity, we do anticipate that to grow, over time. And we'll talk about on the next slide just how these programs work. Okay, so you might have seen this before, but the way the programs are envisioned was it all starts with a capitalization grant from the federal government. Our grants for the SRF programs come from US EPA. Each and every year, we receive a capitalization grant that we're required to match with state matching funds. It's about 20% match from our end. And, it was always expected that these grants would discontinue after some time, but, Ohio and every other state are thrilled to continue because they allow us to do a lot of interesting things with our programs. So with those funds coming into the program, in the circle, that's where a lot of our work is happening. We're conducting environmental reviews, we're conducting financial reviews and engineering reviews while you're working to get your project to the finish line. You'll be either planning it, designing it, or getting ready to bid. And once your project has been designed and you're ready to go, a loan will be awarded, and that's when OWDA, our partners at Ohio Water Development Authority, will be conducting project disbursement on a reimbursement basis. So we'll be funding your projects over time. You'll be repaying your loan along with interest, and that gets revolved back into the program. Ohio is one of probably, I think, about 20 states that actually leverages our program. So we go out on the bond market, on the strength of our program to raise additional funds to be able to meet the demand of our borrowers. Like I said, our capacity in the wastewater fund is about $700 million a year, but we sometimes see demand of, somewhere around $2.5 billion in demand and, somewhere around $700 to $800 million a year in loan funds going out. Okay, so, just looking at what types of projects are eligible on a wastewater, for a wastewater program through WPCLF, a lot of times it's easier to say what's not eligible, but by and large, if you're doing work in your wastewater collection system or at your wastewater treatment plant, odds are it's going to be eligible for our programs. What you see in front of you are just an example of some of the projects we worked on in 2021. We work with borrowers on their very small projects, to the very largest projects for our large communities in Ohio. What you'll see here is just examples of your kind of routine sewer rehabilitation, wastewater treatment plant renovations, as well as things like deep tunnels for combined sewer overflows. We've done a number of projects exceeding $200 million for combined sewer overflows. So we're really able to meet the needs and demands of some of our small and large communities. What you see here also at the bottom in the left-hand column, stormwater and storm sewer projects are kind of a newer feature of our program. Some changes to the Clean Water Act back in about 2015 allowed us to have more of a focus on storm sewer projects. So demand's kind of creeping up. Not too many storm sewer projects, but certainly if that's something you're interested in, you're welcome to reach out to us and nominate those projects, and we'll kind of talk about that process later on. And, we've had a lot of focus probably for the last 10 years on household sewage treatment systems. We've got a really effective and popular program through the local health departments to give principal forgiveness directly to homeowners for repair and replacement of failing septic systems. And at the bottom right, we do planning, design, and construction. At the end of the day, we're talking about loans and some grant-like funding, but those are the vehicles. They are loan agreements, and they are planning, design, and construction loans. Okay, likewise, this list, we're looking at drinking water examples for the water supply revolving loan account. Likewise, if you're doing work in your distribution system or at your water treatment plant, odds are it's eligible. So, any types of projects at your water treatment plant, working in pump stations, booster stations, replacing water lines and water mains, those are typically eligible. In both programs, we've seen kind of new or emerging issues. On the clean water side, it's been, maybe stormwater is a newer issue. On the drinking water side, lead service line is really a big focus, and we'll talk more about the funding opportunities for lead service lines. But, lead, we've been making assistance available for the last 5 or 6 years, and much more to come through the infrastructure bill. I didn't mention on the last slide, but a big focus for Ohio EPA for both water and wastewater is the concept of regionalization or consolidation. So a lot of times there's good economies of scale that can be accomplished through doing projects where maybe a larger public water system or wastewater utility takes on an area, an unserved area or an underserved area to provide wastewater or water service. So definitely an incentive, and that's something we plan to continue to focus on in the coming years. Okay, so how does the process work? With our normal process and with the process we're establishing through the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law funding, we expect it'll be pretty familiar to all of you who have had experience with the program. These programs are run on the wastewater side on a calendar year and on the drinking water side on the state fiscal year. And it all starts with a project nomination. This is a non-binding commitment for you to kind of raise your hand and say you're interested to receive funding for your project. So we typically, in a typical year, accept nominations for the wastewater program in the month of August for a program that runs on the calendar year. and for the drinking water program in the month of February for a program that runs on the state fiscal year. After the nomination, that's when a lot of the hard work happens. That's when you're going to be working on, developing your project plan, developing your design, getting these costs identified. That's when Ohio EPA will be working on, the environmental, financial, and other reviews that we need to conduct. Now, there at the application, that's when you're going to have your cost established. So at this point, you should have a pretty good idea of what your cost is, and you'll submit a financial application that kind of gives us a sense of, what cost you're looking for to receive your loan, and also, do you have the ability to repay a loan as well as own, operate, and maintain your system? You'll bid your project. Typically we see for most of our projects, they're competitively bid in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code, and you'll receive, your bid and select your, lowest and best bidder. At that point, you're ready to probably enter into a loan agreement with us. So we've done all the hard work. You've got your bid, and you're ready for your loan to be established. At that point, you'll sign the loan agreement, and we actually present these loans at the Ohio Water Development Authority board meetings each and every month, with exception of November. Once it is approved, we'll award your loan, and the project can proceed. And reimbursements occur on a kind of as needed basis. So as the project proceeds, you'll get reimbursement for the cost you've undertaken. Okay, so moving on, kind of a small portion of our program, but arguably the most popular and has the most interest is principal forgiveness. What is that? So, we don't really issue grants, but we've got the ability to issue loans that don't need to be repaid. So we don't call them grants, but it is grant-like funding, and it acts like a grant even though it is a loan. So, this concept and this program offering has been around since 2009. This was initially established by Congress, who saw the SRF programs as a really effective way to get money out the door to water and wastewater infrastructure projects. So during the era, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the SRF programs across the country had the ability to issue some of their, capitalization grant dollars out the door as principal forgiveness loans to communities. And each and every year, we're told by Congress what we can offer. The wastewater, our capitalization grant from US EPA is much larger than the drinking water program. But the maximum we've been able to offer through the WPCLF has typically been about $35 million a year in principal forgiveness, and about $13 million a year in the drinking water program as principal forgiveness. So who's getting this money? By and large, it's going to disadvantaged communities, and we've really had to focus on projects that are more ready to proceed. Perhaps your design's complete, or you've got your permits in hand. A lot of people like to use the term shovel ready. We've been really driving our communities and consultants to do whatever you can to get your project ready to proceed. We focused on water and wastewater infrastructure largely, as well as the home sewage treatment system project through the health districts that I previously mentioned. We continue to prioritize regionalization for both programs, for wastewater and drinking water, really trying to identify those projects where you've got a capable borrower that is able to be a regional provider. And one of those newer program areas for principal forgiveness is lead service line replacement. We took a pretty big leap along with about 10 other states, and we had the ability to take money from our wastewater fund and directed to the drinking water fund to be made available as principal forgiveness. So about 2 years ago, we transferred $20 million from the clean water fund to the drinking water fund to be made available for lead service line replacement. It's been very popular. We've been very pleased with the efforts from our public water systems to take advantage of that money. And we think we made a really good impact on lead service line. And through bill, we're going to be able to remove even more lead service lines across the state. Okay, and just this example here before I turn it back over to Jerry, this just illustrates kind of a typical program year for the WPCLF. What you see here is, our annual loan volume. I mentioned it's about $695 million. So that's what we're able to push out the door each and every year in perpetuity. Our CAP grant that we receive from US EPA is about $90 million. And through that CAP grant, the allowable amount of principal forgiveness we're allowed to make to our wastewater borrowers is about $35 million. So it just goes to illustrate, the principal forgiveness is very popular, but there's a lot of demand for it. There's a lot of competition. And, by and large, the money that comes through the SRF programs is not grant dollars, it is loan dollars. But certainly, we spend the time and work with you to, put those principal forgiveness dollars to good use. So Jerry, I'll turn it back over to you, and I will be back on shortly.
Thanks, John. That was great. Always good to review. For those of us that are familiar with the state revolving fund program, kind of review the process and how it works. For some of the people in the audience, they may be kind of thinking, well, why are we talking about the state revolving fund programs when I'm interested in the federal infrastructure bill? Well, the short answer to that is that the federal infrastructure bill that passed is going to make a substantial amount of money available for water and wastewater infrastructure, but the mechanism that it's going to be routed through, or the delivery, is going to be through the state revolving fund programs. And so that's why it's really important that we share with you how the SRFs work, how local governments, public water systems can access these funds. So jumped ahead a slide. Sorry about that. So I'm going to take over here, and we're going to talk for a little bit about the federal infrastructure bill and some of the aspects of it. Now, some of this will be review for you all if you attended our first webinar, but it's important information, and we think it's kind of critical for laying the foundation of understanding. So we want to take a few minutes to review this. Then we're going to kind of move on to some of the newer aspects that we have to share with you. So the federal infrastructure bill goes by a number of different names. Formally, it's called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. And so you will often hear to it referred as the IIJA. More commonly, it is called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL, or bill. So if you hear IIJA or the BIL or bill, it's really all the same thing. It's the federal infrastructure bill that passed Congress and was signed by the president in November of 2021. So about 5 months ago. And this is really a very large and diverse federal infrastructure bill. In total, there was about $1.2 trillion worth of funding that was included in the IIJA for a wide variety of infrastructure. So we're talking about roads and bridges and rail and ports and airports and just all manner of infrastructure. The part that we want to focus in on is the portions that are going to be routed through US EPA and are included within their budget, and then more specifically, the water and wastewater portions of it. So the slide that you see here is the portions of the federal infrastructure bill that is being administered through US EPA. And right on the top, the largest share of the $60 billion that's being administered by US EPA, $44 billion is going to be going through the state revolving fund programs. You can see down below there a whole bunch of other aspects and interesting infrastructure will be coming through the IIJA. So we wanted to be clear that the infrastructure bill is not just water and wastewater. It's a variety of infrastructure and in a variety of environmental infrastructure. But the part we want to hone in on today is that part at top, the $44 billion that's going to be routed through the state revolving fund program. So I like to try to convey when I'm talking to folks about this, I use the terms there's 2 programs, 3 purposes, and over 5+ years. And the next series of slides that I have are that's going to be the theme: 2 programs, 3 purposes, and 5 years. And it's really, I think, important to kind of understand that, because that is the superstructure of the money that we're going to have available, and it also is kind of some of the parameters that we need to work with. So the 2 programs, of course, are the state revolving fund programs, the SRFs, as we call them. And in Ohio, as John said, our clean water SRF is called the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, or WPCLF, and our drinking water SRF program we call the Water Supply Revolving Loan Account. So those are the 2 programs through which Ohio's portion of the infrastructure money will flow. And it's going to be for 3 purposes. So one is for more funds that are going to be coming into the core programs. It could be used for any eligible clean water or drinking water purpose. 2 is some designated funds for projects that are going to address emerging contaminants. And then the third main purpose is some designated funds that are intended to be used for lead service line replacement projects. So 2 programs, 3 purposes, and then 5 years. So this infrastructure bill money is going to be spread over 5+ years. And I say 5+ years because the federal appropriations will be through 2022 through 2026. And, we anticipate that we will still be administering some of that funds probably into 2027, 2028. So 5+ years. So, try to remember that if you can. 2 programs, 3 purposes, 5+ years. So here's just a graphic that kind of shows these 5 pots of money, if you will. So this is the 2 programs and the 3 purposes. And basically what we have here is the state is going to be receiving 2 different grants into our clean water SRF program and 3 different grants into our drinking water SRF program. And so we're going to walk through these kind of one by one as a review, and we're going to go kind of in the purpose category. So we're going to have 3 slides, and we're going to kind of talk about those 3 purposes one at a time. So the first, let's talk about that general category. So you see there's a red outline over these boxes. So the state is going to be receiving a clean water SRF and a drinking water SRF, what we call a supplemental grant. And these funds will be coming into the core of the program. The numbers that you see on the slide here, these are national numbers. These aren't Ohio numbers. So we've got some Ohio specific numbers for you in just a little bit. But let's just take a look at the funding that's being provided for the general supplemental. And that's what this slide is. So it's kind of summary. Across the country, there's going to be $11.7 billion that is going to be allocated to each the clean water and the drinking water SRF programs. This is going to be spread over 5 years, as we said. The allocations, what each state is going to get, is based on a formula that is already established. And so we're able to estimate how much money Ohio is going to get, frankly, throughout the 5-year period. There is a 10% state match that is required for each one of these grants that the states get. To be clear, this is not a match that our loan applicants are going to be required to come up with. This is a match that the state needs to come up with in order to receive the grant from US EPA. Now, these funds can be used for any state revolving fund eligible project. So it's not project specific. It could be used for anything that we typically have funded in the past. There is a mandated what we call additional subsidy of 49% of each one of these capitalization grants. Additional subsidy, as John kind of indicated, we call principal forgiveness. So about 49% of the grants that we get under the general category will be awarded out as principal forgiveness. And when we say 49%, it means no more and no less. It has to be exactly 49%. And at the bottom of the slide, I put the bullet down there that all state revolving fund requirements apply. And that was written right into the infrastructure bill, and that is an expectation from US EPA. So next, we'll just talk about the second purpose, the emerging contaminants purpose, right? So here the state will be receiving a clean water SRF grant each year for emerging contaminants and also a grant for the drinking water SRF for emerging contaminants. And this slide kind of shows some of the important points about that. The nationwide, there's going to be $1 billion made available through the clean water SRF and $4 billion available through the drinking water SRF for these types of projects. Now, this is kind of a new funding for the state revolving fund program. So these projects have always been eligible, but there's never been like a dedicated, designated pot of money specifically for these. So that is a little bit new. And the state, through the SRF programs, we have to use this money for these types of projects. Once again, the allocations, like the amount of money that Ohio is going to get, is based on a formula. So we will be getting the same amount, this amount of money in each of the 5 years, provided that we can show a list of projects that will substantiate our grant request. Interestingly, for these pots of money, there is no state match that is required. So the SRF programs don't have to come up with a state match. That's advantageous to the programs. These funds, as I said, can only be used for projects that address emerging contaminants, and we're going to have a little bit more information on that just a little bit later. The mandated additional subsidy for these two grants is 100%. So these funds can go out as 100% principal forgiveness. It can be administered purely as grant funds. However, all state revolving fund requirements apply. So you'll see that as a common theme throughout, all three purposes. Next up and last, kind of in our progression here, is the drinking water SRF funding that's going to be made available for lead service lines. And this is perhaps the most significant feature of the federal infrastructure bill. Under the IIJA, $15 billion is going to be made available to the drinking water SRF program specifically for lead service line replacement. So this is what I refer to as a designated or dedicated a pot of money. So the funds that come to the SRF programs in each state have to be used for these types of projects. Once again, the allocation that Ohio gets is based on a set formula. There are no state matching funds required, so we're pleased about that. The funds that are coming from this grant can only be used for the design and construction of lead service line replacement projects. That was written right into the federal infrastructure bill, and at least right now, it's pretty rigidly set that way. The mandated additional subsidy from the bipartisan infrastructure law is 49%. So of the money that Ohio gets, we have to award 49%, no more, no less, of those funds as additional subsidy, and the remainder of the money has to be awarded as loan funds. And so it's going to be on the state SRF program to try to design a program that will be able to deliver these funds to public water systems. There is a potential for a reallotment of unawarded grants, probably beginning in 2025. So occasionally we hear the question, well, what if there's funds that other states aren't using in other parts of the country? And there may be the opportunity for Ohio to apply for and get some of the grants if they are not awarded to the other state programs, and we'll certainly be taking a close eye on that. Once again, all the normal state revolving fund program requirements will be applied to these funds. So there's the table, and this is really, if you're into the numbers part of it, this is it in a nutshell. This shows you kind of in total what Ohio's portions will be throughout the 5 years, throughout the two programs, and throughout the three purposes. So you can see there that the two columns that are green are the funding that we'll get to our clean water SRF, our kind of our base program, and then that emerging contaminant purpose. And then the three columns in the blue are the three grants that Ohio will have to apply for each year for the drinking water grants. And there'll be one for, kind of the base supplemental, one for emerging contaminants, and one for lead service line replacements. So if you add all these grants up over all 5 years and you kind of look at the kind of the bottom right there, you'll see that in total, Ohio's portion will be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1.4 billion worth of funds over the 5-year period. At the bottom of the slide, what you see there in kind of the gold, maybe pumpkin color, is the amount of the funds that we estimate will be available as principal forgiveness over the 5-year period. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along here. So just wanted to take kind of that information and put it into another format for you. Here is kind of a bar chart of each one of the 5 grants and how much of the grant will be available as principal forgiveness. So we really are trying to reinforce the point that this is not all grant-like money. It's not all principal forgiveness money. So if you see on the far left there, the largest amount of money that we will be getting will be coming into our Clean Water SRF, our supplemental, our kind of our core program. And we'll be receiving over $600 million over the 5-year period. Of that, about $300 million will be available, again, over the 5-year period as principal forgiveness. The 2 emerging contaminant grants will be awarded as 100% principal forgiveness. So that's why the green line and the pumpkin line are the same size, because all of it will go out as principal forgiveness. And then if you take a look at the far right there, we do need folks to understand that of the money that we're getting for lead service line replacements, not all of that will be available as grant funds, as principal forgiveness funds. 50% of it roughly will have to go out as loan type funding. So what does this look like, as we move forward into from year to year? And so we wanted to try to provide a graphic that would show you kind of like a hypothetical funding year. So I've got one for each program. So what you're looking at here is the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, kind of a hypothetical funding year, including the infrastructure bill funds. So this is similar to a slide that John had a little while ago, but now we're kind of looking at it from the standpoint of what would that look like once we start administering the infrastructure funds. And what you'll see here is the loan volume, the big blue circle, the biggest one, right? We're just estimating, like let's just estimate that because we have infrastructure bill money, we're able to perhaps loan out even more. So our loan volume, our total loan volume might be somewhere in the neighborhood of $900 million, right? Now, the amount of that may come to the state as a capitalization grant each year would be, say, $175 million. And then that smallest circle, that pumpkin color again, as I like to call it, the amount that we will be able to administer as principal forgiveness will probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $81 million, give or take. So it is important that folks need, to understand that not everything that we do will be going out as principal forgiveness. Here's kind of a similar slide, but now we're looking at the drinking water program. And again, this is hypothetical, but just to kind of get you in the ballpark. So in this case, kind of projecting what would these programs look like once we start administering the IIJA funds? Well, we may be able to loan out somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, $300 million a year in loan funds. We would do that with about $150 million in capitalization grants that would come to the state every year. The amount that we would be of that $300 million each year total that we could administer as principal forgiveness would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 83, give or take, $83 million a year. So with these funds, we're going to be able to do some pretty great things, and we're going to be able to fund some really fantastic projects that you all bring forward to us. But we also are going to have an increased capacity for loan funds, and so we will be able to loan out even more as we move on. So continuing on, we wanted to talk a little bit now about the where the programs are. What is some of the new information that we have? And so we wanted to spend a little bit of time to provide some of the highlights, what we think are some of the highlights from the US EPA implementation memo. Now, for anyone that has not been closely involved and paying attention to this from day to day, a lot of the state SRF programs have been waiting since the passage of the bill back in November of last year for US EPA to produce what they called guidance. And they did that a little over a month ago. It was March 8th, I think, of this year. So they produced this implementation memo, as they call it. And so with that memo, it's a long document. It's about 56 pages. If you haven't seen it and you're interested in it, I think you could probably just Google US EPA implementation memo, and it will probably be your at the top of your list of hits. So you could take a look at it yourself. Some of the things that we think are most important is that it had a general review of the overall provisions and the funding and the timing and the restrictions. So it kind of reviewed in more of a narrative form what the bill had to say, and probably took the language from the law and put it in more plain English. There was some clarification on the eligible recipients for additional subsidy, or what we call principal forgiveness, and we're going to talk about that. There was a definite focus in the implementation memo on disadvantaged communities and how those disadvantaged communities are defined. There was included with the implementation memo, there was definitions that were provided for the clean water SRF emerging contaminants, drinking water SRF emerging contaminants, and lead service line project types. So, a little bit more definition about those things, which were new. And then it provided some guidelines for how the states are to apply and administer the funds. So with one of the first points there, additional subsidy, this was an area that was a little unclear. Many people thought it was clear, but it was a little unclear exactly who the additional subsidy could be awarded to, and kind of what the rules of the road would be there. So the implementation memo provided additional information on that, and the principal forgiveness is generally restricted to just those communities that either meet the disadvantaged community definition under the drinking water SRF, or meet the affordability criteria under the Clean Water SRF, or Clean Water Act. So this table here kind of summarizes the 5 different pots of money, the percentage of additional subsidy that the state is allowed to administer, the restrictions on that money, meaning who we're restricted to awarding it to, or who's eligible to receive it, and then an approximate amount of the additional subsidy that we will have on an annual basis. So we won't run through them all, but just to, for an example, we'll look at the top line there, the Clean Water SRF Supplemental, which happens to be probably the biggest grant that the state will get. The percentage of additional subsidy that's mandated is 49%, no more, no less. That's the amount that the state has to administer. And for that principal forgiveness, the loan applicants, the applicants that we're working with, must meet the state's affordability criteria in order to receive principal forgiveness funds. Any applicant can receive loan funds. There's no restriction on loan funds, but this is just principal forgiveness funds. And then the amount of money that will be available each year, estimated, will be about $50 to $65 million a year in our Water Pollution Control Loan Fund for those types of projects. So there's other examples there of all the 5 different pots of money that we will get. But just to kind of summarize, the Clean Water SRF Supplemental, the Drinking Water SRF Supplemental, and the Drinking Water Lead Service Line, all of those, the applicants, the recipients of the funds, have to meet the affordability criteria or the disadvantaged community criteria, depending on the program. Let's move on to the next slide. And sorry, I think this is where I'm going to hand it off to John, and we're going to talk about another feature in the implementation memo, how the state defines disadvantaged communities and affordability. And this is an area that we've taken at least an initial look at, and John wants to share some information about some of the thoughts that we have right now about that.
Thank you, Jerry. So yeah, you've seen probably on a number of the slides, we've talked a lot about additional subsidy. We've talked a lot about disadvantaged communities. We've talked about affordability criteria. So I just kind of want to bring that home, give you a little refresher on what we're doing now and kind of what we're proposing for the future. So you've got 2 columns here for the WPCLF on the left and the WSRLA on the right-hand column. The WPCLF, what we use for our disadvantaged communities, we call the affordability criteria. And this has been in place since about 2015. We developed this criteria in accordance with the Clean Water Act, and this is what we use to identify disadvantaged communities for principal forgiveness. So you'll see this in common for both columns, but for clean water, historically, we have looked at communities with a population under 10,000. So once you meet that, we look at 3 of these 4 other criteria, which we use ACS data to determine. That's American Community Survey census data. So these benchmarks, we had a benchmark for median household income. I believe we used the statewide average. We look at an unemployment rate that's kind of pegged to the national average. Likewise, we look at a benchmark based on per capita income, and we look at percentage population change. So each and every year, we look at the most recent census data, and we come up with a list of communities on the wastewater side that are eligible for principal forgiveness. So you have to be under 10,000, and you have to meet 3 of these 4 other kind of socioeconomic criteria. So if you jump on over to the right-hand side, this is the criteria for the drinking water program to identify disadvantaged communities. Similar program, we call it the Disadvantaged Community Loan Program. Like the clean water side, you have to be a community under 10,000. One thing that's different, you do have to have human health factors to qualify your project for principal forgiveness. So when I say human health factors, we're looking at things like contaminated wells. You could have maximum contaminant level exceedances for drinking water standards, E. coli contamination, things like that. That's what we consider a human health factor. Likewise, we look at benchmarks for median household income and poverty rate, and we look at benchmarks for affordability based on sewer and water rates, kind of compare those to the statewide average. Historically, you had to be under 10,000, you had to meet those human health factors, you had to have either MHI or poverty rate, and you had to meet those sewer and water rate benchmarks. So there was no 3 or 4, it was kind of meeting all of these things with the exception of either MHI or poverty rate. So that's the current, kind of our current regime. You know, we look at the clean water side on the calendar year, and we look at the drinking water program on the state fiscal year. Okay, bear with me for a second. All right, so, you know, looking at the US EPA implementation memo and kind of closely looking at our affordability criteria for both programs, you know, we saw an opportunity to kind of modernize our criteria. They've been in existence for a long time. We saw an opportunity to more closely align them and potentially to expand the definitions to include larger communities. So this might be a little small, but we'll go through this fairly slowly. On the left side, we've got our proposed WPCLF affordability criteria. So still looking at, you know, certain benchmarks based on census data. We're keeping the median household income, proposing to keep that statewide average. You would have to be less than the statewide MHI. We're looking at an unemployment rate, and this might seem low to you. It's a little bit of a different unemployment factor. I believe what we're looking at here is civilians 16 years or older in the civilian labor force. So that's a statewide average for Ohio. We're looking at a poverty rate, so there's no longer a per capita income. We have implemented a poverty rate to be consistent with the drinking water program, and this is individuals in Ohio that are, you know, below 200% of the poverty level. And likewise, the percent population change, we are keeping that. That's based on decennial census data, so looking at 2010 to 2020. And I believe we kind of brought that down a little bit to be a little more realistic. So it's a 50% increase. You would have to meet that, less than 50% increase. And we are saying you would have to meet 3 out of these 4 criteria. So let's jump over to the right side to the Disadvantaged Community Loan Program for the WSRLA, our drinking water program. So we're still saying you have to meet these human health factors. That's not going away. So we're still really looking to prioritize projects that are addressing with acute contamination and, you know, impacts to human health, you know, the drinking water. So you still have to have those presence of indicators. You know, we're looking at the sewer and water rate benchmarks. You know, these are actually taken from Ohio EPA's water and sewer rate survey, and we look at the statewide average MHI compared to those sewer rates. So currently that's 2.5%. We're looking at median household income. So like the clean water side, that's going to be the statewide average. The same poverty rate as the clean water side. So looking at the 200% of the poverty level benchmark, and the same unemployment rate. So we're actually sharing 3 of the same criteria between both programs. There's going to be a lot of consistency, we think, between both programs. If you meet one, you're probably going to meet the other. You know, on the drinking water side, you still have to have those indicators. And, you know, with this program, it's 3 out of 4 criteria. That allows a little more flexibility and, you know, allows us to kind of better identify our universe for these criteria. So what will we do with these? So this is kind of your base. These are our proposals for affordability criteria and the disadvantaged community loan programs. What we envision is kind of making some programmatic decisions based on these criteria. Historically, you know, principal forgiveness was really targeted towards communities under 10,000, we will continue to do that. We believe we have an opportunity to really reach some disadvantaged areas within larger communities too. So, these communities, whether you're large or small, will still have to meet our affordability criteria, but there may be avenues or possibilities for your projects, even if you're in a large community, to obtain some principal forgiveness. For the clean water side on the left, we definitely expect there to be more targeting on the large community side. So maybe specific project types would be competing for that limited principal forgiveness. Let's take a look at the WSRLA on the right-hand side. So we think by and large, principal forgiveness will be limited to public water systems for the supplemental principal forgiveness. Emerging contaminants a little bit different. The affordability criteria will be used for maybe that 25% of the emerging contaminant grant. But lead, we're looking at communities of any size. So communities large and small, if you have lead lines and you meet our affordability criteria, you'll have access to those principal forgiveness dollars. We're really encouraging people. We'll talk about our timelines. If you've got lead projects, please nominate them, whether you're large or small. It's not all principal forgiveness. I think we're trying to really hammer that in. It's 49% of that lead capitalization grant can be used as principal forgiveness. But large communities, if you're out there, you will have an opportunity to compete for these principal forgiveness dollars for lead. Okay, so maybe talking more specifically about these new dollars. So, emerging contaminants and lead, this money specifically through the SRFs is kind of new, especially through the bill. If you haven't seen them, we do have some attachments talking about our definition. So this PowerPoint's available as an attachment. We've got a fact sheet and a handout kind of better detailing what we've got here in the slide. So clean water, what was provided to the states was more of a definition of emerging contaminants for that clean water the clean water bill grant for Ohio EPA. And, we're looking at projects that maybe are dealing with PFAS or your forever chemicals. We're looking potentially at pharmaceuticals, things like that. What we're not looking at when we're talking about emerging contaminants is nutrients, things that already have, NPDES permit limits, things like that. That's not an emerging contaminant. The drinking water and lead and emerging contaminants in the fact sheet and the guidance provided by US EPA actually goes into a little more detail on the types of projects that are available to be funded and maybe examples of those projects. So encourage you to look at those handouts and contact us with any questions, but it's a little more hammered out, and the drinking water is a little more close to implementation, we think, than clean water. So please take a look at that, and more details to come on that soon. But certainly if you have lead questions or emerging contaminant questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time, to Jerry, myself, and we do have an email address we'll have posted later that you can send your questions to. Okay, so what's this look like? The timing and how is this all going to be operated? We think with the structure of our two SRF programs, this will be very familiar to our existing borrowers. We do intend to kind of keep on with our annual cycles, so the clean water program on the calendar year and the drinking water program on the state fiscal year. What's a little bit different is, we do need to have our program management plans or intended use plans in hand when we apply for these grants from US EPA to be making this principal forgiveness available, through the bipartisan infrastructure law. So everything's going to come down to our development of our intended use plans and our program management plans. When we're ready to apply for this money from US EPA, we will provide our intended use plans. That's the list of all the projects that have raised their hands for funding, along with a lot of our paperwork, our grant application, and assurances that we provide to US EPA from the state of Ohio. So it'll be an annual process. It's going to be a little bit different, kind of right in front of us in the rest of this calendar year 2022, but we will be getting back to our regular cycle for all of this funding in future program years. So we're going to start with drinking water. Drinking water, the bill, the timing really worked out a lot better for us to get the word out and to get project nominations in. So, for those of you familiar with the program, we typically accept nominations in the month of February, and we spend the time between, March and May to develop our program management plan, score projects, and identify those for additional subsidy or the principal forgiveness. So we're working on program year 2023 right now. Typically, we have that program management plan draft out for public comment and public notice in mid-May, and we hold a public hearing in mid-June. So we do intend to kind of follow that process this year. And what are we going to have available, on July 1? We think we'll have an intended use plan in hand that allows us to apply for our normal capitalization grant this year that came, as a result of the federal budget bill, as well as two of the funds made available through the bill. We can apply for kind of our supplemental drinking water grant and part of the lead service line grant. We don't have quite enough nominations. We have to have enough project nominations to support, those dollar amounts that we're receiving the grant for. So we plan to have this PMP finalized by July 1, and we're going to turn around right away and call for nominations. So if you didn't apply for lead service line projects, if you didn't apply for emerging contaminant projects, we're going to have a supplemental nomination period, likely in the month of August. So, there'll be lots of information coming out on that soon. So we'll go through a similar process. We're working to amend and public notice our PMP later this fall. And we do apply to receive the rest of our lead service line grant and the drinking water emerging contaminant capitalization grant probably in the month of January, and kind of continue on our normal cycle for the rest of the program year 2023. So 2024, we'll start all over February of next year. That's going to be the opportunity for you to apply for your normal WSRLA program, as well as all these bill funds made available through the infrastructure bill. Okay. All right, jumping over to wastewater. Wastewater, we're a little further behind. The bill, the timing of bill didn't quite line up with our typical calendar year. We think it's important to stay on the calendar year basis. That's what people are used to, and we've got a well-oiled machine here. So what we're hoping to do is kind of apply for our base grant sometime in the month of July. So we've already got an intended use plan that's finalized for the current calendar year, and we think we can apply some of this, our base capitalization grant to projects on our current list. So we're going to go for our bill funds. We'll actually be calling for nominations in the month of August. So this would be our supplemental bill projects, your normal run-of-the-mill projects, and any emerging contaminant wastewater projects. So same time frame. Our typical WPCLF call for nominations will be in the month of August. And likewise, this will follow our standard calendar schedule. We will public notice the draft PMP and intended use plan in the month of October. We would hold a public hearing in the month of, November, and finalize that plan sometime in December before the beginning of calendar year 2023. And we would hope to apply for those CAP grants and have funds in hand in the month of January. And that's going to be more of a regular cycle for clean water for the wastewater program. You're really not going to see much change. And likewise for drinking water, once we get through this kind of this interesting time, the timing, you'll be on a normal cycle for our base funds as well as all the supplemental bill funds. Okay, and Jerry, I think this one might be you, or this one's still me.
Yeah, I'll take it, John. Thank you. That was great information. I know there's a lot of information for everyone, and we're really going to wrap up here in just the last couple of minutes. We just have a couple more slides. We really appreciate you hanging in there. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of money that's available here, and we've tried to be thoughtful about this, and so we're it may be a little bit too much information for some, but I know I've seen questions roll in that there's a lot of questions out there. This slide here is just is showing you kind of from our perspective how much money is going to be available for our 2022 grants, how much of it is principal forgiveness, and then based on those timelines that John just ran through with you, like when we anticipate we're going to apply to US EPA and when we think we will get the grant from US EPA. So we do get a number of questions from folks like, when are you going to get the money? When is it going to be available? When are you going to be able to administer it? And that's what we're kind of showing here. So, just real quickly, what you'll see along the lines that John indicated is that probably the first grants that we're going to apply for and will receive will be the drinking water, what we call our base grant, as well as our supplemental money. The supplemental is the infrastructure bill, and then the lead service line money. We want to try to get that, get access to at least part of it as soon as possible. And then we anticipate applying for our base clean water grant as well. Some of the other grants, we will need a little bit more time in order to develop more projects and have a more robust list of projects that we can share with US EPA. So this is just a framework of what we think we're going to be working on our end here for the next 6 to 9 months, certainly through the end of the year. I'm going to try to, wrap up and one too far. Wrap up here and just kind of give some of the summary, some of what I think are the main points, and then we're going to move on to questions and answers. So, yeah, I think you've probably heard loud and clear that the funds are being routed through the SRF programs. It's not all grant money. It's going to be combinations of grants and principal forgiveness. There's a definite federal focus on disadvantaged communities overall. But certainly when it comes to the principal forgiveness portion of the infrastructure bill money, the thing that the infrastructure bill is going to do is it's going to strengthen just the core program so much. It's going to make these programs more and more healthier. We're going to have more ability and capacity to loan out funds for projects all around the state. And it's also got those new funds for targeted purposes like emerging contaminants and lead service lines. So we're really super excited about the opportunity to get those funds and to administer them. Project readiness will be a key factor, and we have been stressing that for several years. And when we say that, we mean, people ask us sometimes, well, how can I access some of this money? And we're happy to talk to anyone about that at any time. But really, we need to have projects that are on the way towards implementation. I mean, projects that have maybe have design underway or design completed, projects that are ready to go, towards construction. So that's going to be a factor throughout the next 5 years. Some folks might say, well, geez, I don't have my design started. Maybe I need help getting a design underway. Well, we think that we're going to be able to have some funds set aside in each of the programs to potentially assist with the design of some of these projects to get them shovel ready. So those are some of the key points. Remember, this is all going to play out over the next 5+ years. So if people are kind of thinking, gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be ready for this yet, we've got a long period of time to administer these funds and to help you get into position where you can hopefully access some of the funds. Moving forward, like what are some of the things to watch out for? Well, John covered these. Keep an eye out for the draft intended use plan for our drinking water program. There'll be lots of great information on that. Keep an eye out for the supplemental call for project nominations on the drinking water side. That's going to be for emerging contaminant related projects and for lead service line projects. Keep an eye out this summer for our Water Pollution Control Loan Fund call for nominations. That'll probably be in August when we would anticipate that. So anytime that you see an announcement from us that says call for nominations or, we're trying to accept nominations, really pay attention to those, because that is the point in time where you can nominate your project and let us know, and we can get it on our list. And then lastly, this is our second webinar on kind of the federal infrastructure bill, and we anticipate maintaining good contact with people. So we will probably be having a webinar this summer. We don't have a date picked out yet, but we're working towards that. Moving forward, how to stay engaged, and this is really important to us. Like, we want you to be engaged, and there's a bunch of ways that you can do it. Probably the most important is, comments, questions, any kind of feedback. We would love to hear from you. Send it to our dedicated email address. It's at infrastructurefunding@epa.ohio.gov. We set that up a couple of months ago, and we've already been receiving some comments and some questions to that email inbox, and so that is really a good place to go. We will have materials posted on our website. We've got some there already. We will be posting a YouTube link, I think, of this presentation on there. Please follow DEFA newsletters and follow Ohio EPA on social media if you don't already, because we really are using social media to help get some of our information out there. Certainly follow any of the SRF program announcements that we have, and again, we hope to have a webinar update in the summer of 22. So I know it's been a lot of information, kind of action-packed for you. I'm going to turn it over to Jesse, who's going to, I think, Jesse and team are going to kind of moderate a question and answer session.
Thanks, Jerry and John, for the overview. Yes, if you haven't already done so, we're going to go ahead and open it up to our Q&A. And so this is, again, your opportunity to submit questions for John and Jerry to take a stab at answering those. We've actually had so many come in so far from the material that John and Jerry presented. And we've actually had some staff go ahead and respond privately to some of those more specific questions or maybe material that was already covered. And so we are going to try to, I think, answer as many questions as we can today, try to get through. Last time, I think we got through almost all of them. Just one thing to note is that there is handouts. So everything that was presented from John and Jerry, and I believe John mentioned this in his comments, but again, if you click on that document icon on your attendee interface, you can see there's the PowerPoint presentation, there's a fact sheet. And so all of this information, the contact numbers, things like that, that is all there for you to access. So you can, again, look up something if you had a question about it. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and start with our first question. And it's from Larry Falcon, and it's, can you fund green infrastructure to manage stormwater where it falls and keep it out of combined sewers? And I think this is something, John, maybe in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, hi, Larry. Good question. We can and we have done a lot of work funding green infrastructure for CSO type projects. They're eligible. I think the one thing to keep in mind when you're working on a stormwater type project is just how that's going to be repaid. Sometimes with a more generic stormwater project, you have to have a stormwater utility. You wouldn't be able to use your sewer revenues. But I think we've seen both ways. Certainly, we funded very small and very, very large green infrastructure projects. So it's eligible for loan funding through our program, through the WPCLF.
And our next question, I think, is for John as well. This is coming from Edward Logsdon. Are the interest rates set, or do they adjust depending on the economic status of the municipality?
Yeah, good question, Edward. Thanks. The interest rates for the program, we have a standard interest rate that's reset every month. So it's based on market conditions. So we've got a standard rate that applies to all of our communities, but we also have a variety of interest rate discounts for small communities, for disadvantaged communities, sometimes for programmatic reasons too, like I mentioned regionalization. We've been offering incentives for that. So we do have interest rate discounts. On the wastewater side, we do have interest rates based on community size and so some of the socioeconomic conditions. So we're happy to talk to you about that if you'd like more information. And certainly our program management plans and our website speak a lot about our interest rates.
Thanks, John. I think this is another question for you, but this is from Steve Kayetin, and I apologize if I pronounce anyone's names wrong today, but Steve's question is, how will this work for CMAR projects for a nomination to award process?
Yeah, good question, Steve, and hello. So we had some questions about construction manager at risk and design build. Those are alternative delivery methods compared to your typical design bid build that we see for infrastructure projects. Both of those are eligible for our program. We've worked on both. The way it works, you would still nominate that project through our annual cycles. We would probably want you to work a little more closely with us, just so there's a little more moving parts with these types of delivery methods. So happy to sit down with you and chat, but anybody doing design build or CMAR, we're happy to work with you on those types of project deliveries.
Thanks, John. Our next question comes from Kay Borchers. If a community has a public lead main, is there principal forgiveness available for that replacement? How does that process nomination differ from the lead service line PF project process?
Yeah, hi, Kay. So thanks for the question. The money coming through bill for lead service line replacement is very much directed to the lead service line. So we can't do mains. This is going to be the public and private portion of the lead service line. So anything in the right of way or on the private property. So we're really kind of under the gun to make sure that happens. So some of our communities have found ways to get entry, access agreements to work on private property, and maybe they're using door hangers. But that's going to be a really important part of our program, is to do both. So we can't work outside of that. It's really specific to the actual lead service line. We're happy to give other loan funds, or other funds for the main. We can still fund those projects, but it wouldn't be this principal forgiveness and loans funds through the kind of the bill lead service line pot. A little bit different. You're still going to nominate those projects. Just the conditions. It's not going to be full principal forgiveness. That's kind of unlikely. But kind of the same process of nominating, bidding, and building that project.
Thanks, John. The next question is from Stephen Boy. He asked, for the slide showing a typical year, why did OEPA only issue $35 million on PF loans from US EPA, give Ohio the authority to issue up to $90 million in the grants that year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll take that one, and we'll turn it over to Jerry soon. That's actually is the maximum. So Ohio EPA, in the last number of years, we have elected to take the maximum available. So our capitalization grant on the wastewater side has been about $89 million, and we are allowed to make, I believe, 40% available as principal forgiveness, and that equates to $35 million. So we did take the maximum, and through bill, we've got some directives. So Jerry mentioned many times 49%. So we will be making exactly 49% of the money coming through these bill grants available as principal forgiveness to our applicants.
Thanks, John. And our next question, I think, is for Jerry from Edward Logsdon. He's asking, are corporations eligible for funds?
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Ed. Good to hear the question. It's good. These are great questions. So I'm really encouraged. So under the Clean Water and Drinking Water SRF programs, straight from the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act, there are eligible applicants that are defined. And generally speaking, the eligible applicants are municipalities, public entities, entities that are publicly owned treatment works, municipally owned, and community water systems, nonprofit, non-transient public water systems. So in order for us to be able to award funds to an applicant, it has to be an eligible applicant. And in most cases, that means it has to be a public body and not a corporation.
Thanks, Jerry. I think this one is for you as well. It's from Danielle Steinhauser. And she asked, I understand 49% of the supplement C, W, and D WSRFs will be awarded as principal forgiveness. Will that affect the principal forgiveness set aside in the state's non-supplemental allocation from the US EPA?
I think the answer to this, I understand the question, is I don't think it will affect any of the set-asides. So each one of these grants is individual. So the state will get a drinking water supplemental grant. 49% of those funds will be available as principal forgiveness. So it's 49% of that gross grant amount. It comes, from that. So the state can take set-asides or not take set-asides, but it won't affect that 49%. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Jerry. The next question comes from Holly Boyer. Are these values expected to be in addition to the typical year funding or in place of the typical year funding? Jerry, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, that's a great one, and there's a happy answer to that. These are in addition to the normal allocations, so they are not in place of. So it's a very good question, and we talk in terms of 5 grants. There will actually, hopefully, be 7 grants every year. So there'll be our normal allocation, or what we call our base grants to each SRF program. Then there'll be a bill supplemental grant for each program. Then there'll be a bill emerging contaminant grant for each program. So we're up to 6. And then there'll be a bill drinking water lead service line grant. So there will be a total of 7. The only reason why we don't say that a little bit more definitively is that that annual grant that we have been receiving, there's not necessarily a guarantee that Congress will appropriate that money on a continuous basis. So we can't, it's not guaranteed. The bill money for the next 5 years is guaranteed.
Thanks, Jerry. And I think, John, this next question is for you, but it's from Scott Mogling, and he's asking if the portion on the rough estimate slide has to be applied for each year. Does that mean Ohio EPA can apply for more money than shown, since many states will be able to use all the LSL funds given to them because they don't have the need?
Yeah, hi, Scott. Good question. And I think Scott's question is specific to lead service lines, but it really applies to all of these grants. So, the numbers we've shown you specific to Ohio, that's our allocation. So every other state also has an allocation, of this $44 billion infrastructure bill. They have their annual allocations for each of these 5 bill grants. We can apply for what's in front of us for lead. That's about $71 million. If states are unable to use that money, down the road, there would be a reallocation process where US EPA would kind of take that money back that wasn't spent or applied for and give states an opportunity to apply for that. I don't really have a sense of the timeline right now, Scott. That could be, well off in the distance. We could be talking, 1 or more years after this initial, first year of the program to be able to reapply. But certainly we'll take advantage of that if there is, but we wouldn't be able to reapply, apply for it now, at the onset. We can apply for the $71 million.
Thanks, John. Our next question comes from Kay Borchers, and she is asking about the 49%. Will the 49% required principal forgiveness on lead service line programs mean that 49% of the state's allocation will be put toward principal forgiveness, and a specific project could receive 100% principal forgiveness, for instance, or that 49% of any one project can be principal forgiveness? Jerry, would you like to take that question?
I will. It's a great question, Kay. You always have good questions, and I think it's very helpful because I think a lot of people were probably thinking that same question. So I think the answer to your question is this. So what the state has to do is the state has to allocate 49% of the funds that we receive as principal forgiveness. How we do that is really up to the state. Ultimately, it is up to the state. And we have to devise a program that will be effective, right, at trying to administer these funds. So what it's not is it's not dictated in the infrastructure bill that the individual loans that go out have to be at that 49, 51%. So in theory, that drinking water lead service line grant, in theory, it would be perhaps possible to like maybe focus in on the most disadvantaged populations and maybe award some of these funds as 100% principal forgiveness to some applicants, hypothetically, and then some applicants would receive combinations of principal forgiveness and loans. We really haven't kind of gotten a final proposal together on that or recommendation, but the state does have some ability to design a program of how the funds are going out.
Thanks, Jerry. And I think this one is also for you. It's from Stephen Hoy, and he's asking, why can't the amount of personal forgiveness awarded or principal forgiveness awarded in a year equal the total allowable annual CAP grant for that year?
Yeah, hi, Steve. So the amount of principal forgiveness that we administer is dictated to us by Congress, either in the bill, right, the bipartisan infrastructure law, it's dictated, or in the appropriations language that they have used on a year-to-year basis. So in Ohio, if I'm understanding your question, why couldn't we just take our total capitalization grant and use it all? Because we're not allowed to. The Congress basically wants these funds to be used to help perpetuate the state revolving fund programs and to have this principal forgiveness element to it. So what we do in Ohio is we have always We have always strived to make the maximum amount available that we're legally allowed to as principal forgiveness. And the amount that we're not goes into the corpus of the fund, and it's available as loans.
Thanks, Jerry. Our next question comes from Edward Longsdon, and he's asking, will existing loans to disadvantaged communities benefit from the increased principal forgiveness funding? John, would you like to take that one?
Sure, and ask away. We're happy to answer any and all of your questions. They're good questions. I'm sure somebody else has the same one. So probably not is the answer to your question. We really don't have the ability to like refinance loans, so we can't go in and modify the terms of your agreement after it's been executed. So certainly disadvantaged communities with new projects, if they've gone through us before, there's nothing preventing them from getting new loans that might have a principal forgiveness component. But I do not see us really applying principal forgiveness to previously executed loans or projects.
Thanks, John. This next question comes from Brandon Fox, and he was asking kind of a clarifying question. It says, to qualify as a disadvantaged community, do you have to meet all the criteria or just meet one of them? I think that's more your wheelhouse, John.
Yep, sure. Hi, Brandon. Good question. So I don't have the slide pulled up here, but for both clean water and for drinking water, what we're proposing is you have to meet 3 out of those 4 socioeconomic criteria. So for wastewater, you're looking at your median household income, you're looking at poverty rate, you're looking at unemployment rate. So that's really what we're looking at, 3 out of the 4. And the slides are available. Please take a look at those, and we'll certainly have some fact sheets, down the road to better explain these changes. And you actually raised a really good point. I didn't mention this for the lead program. We talked about larger communities having a shot at the principal forgiveness for lead. Large non-disadvantaged communities, we think we do have some pathways for them to access lead service line funds. If you are a large non-disadvantaged community, we have the ability to look at your census tract. So we could look at the census tract level to see if you have disadvantaged areas with lead service lines and potentially make them eligible for principal forgiveness. So by and large, we're looking at 3 out of the 4 criteria to be eligible. For large communities for lead service lines, we can look at the census tract level.
Thanks, John. And for those watching, sorry about bouncing around with screens. I was trying to get to the slide John was referencing, but I wasn't able to do that while he was talking. So I apologize for that. The next question comes from Edward Logsdon, and he is asking how the population criteria of less than 10,000 was determined. It seems low.
I can take that one, Mary. Ed, it's 10. There's nothing magical at 10,000. It's a pretty generally accepted number. We've seen it over the years from many different grant programs from US EPA. We use that at the state level. So there's nothing magical at 10,000. We've used that as an indicator for small communities. On the wastewater side, especially, we've had special discounted rates for communities under 10,000. Certainly other states might have a different determiner than 10,000, but that is what Ohio uses and what we propose to use, moving forward. It's 10,000.
I think this next question is for John again. It's from Scott Moakling, and he's asking what project population size can be used for determining MHI and poverty rate, census tract, or zip code?
Yeah, good question, Scott. So, we are looking at ACS data for both the affordability criteria on the wastewater side and the disadvantaged community loan program on the drinking water side. So we're really looking at the village or city level to determine that information, those metrics. We do have the ability, like I just mentioned, to look at the census tract level for non-disadvantaged communities just to see if they have maybe some disadvantaged areas in the service area. But, for a public water system, we would certainly be looking at the city, perhaps the city you're located in, and to determine your population, we would look at your service area. But that's what we're looking at is the ACS data for your city, community, village, and the service area for your public water system or wastewater utility.
Thanks, John. Our next question comes from Michael Vinay. He asks, how is the affordability criteria applied to county metropolitan sewer districts? Who would like to take that one?
I can take that one as well. And this kind of goes for sewer and water districts on both the wastewater and water side. I guess the quick answer is we would look at those on a case-by-case basis. I think historically we've looked at maybe the city that entity is located within or the county. We know there are a number of water and sewer districts that span multiple counties. So, we're certainly happy to look. It's a little bit of departure from the way we looked at things in the past. But now that we're looking at populations above 10,000, we would certainly look at those multi-county districts, on a case-by-case basis. But typically, we're going to still look for census data. It might be on the county level, it might be on the city level, but that's how we would approach those districts.
Thanks, John. I think this is another one for you. It's from Elizabeth Barlick, and she's asking the affordability benchmark of the 2.5% MHI. What's the ratio for water and sewer individually?
Sorry, could you repeat that one? I'm kind of following along here. I kind of lost her.
No, you're fine. This one is from Elizabeth Barlick, and she's asking for the affordability benchmark of the 2.5% MHI. What's the ratio for water and sewer individually?
Yeah, good question, Elizabeth. Thanks. I just found it. So the 2.5% benchmark that we've used for the water supply revolving loan account, that is combined. So that's a 2.5% average between water and sewer rates. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's about 1.3% for water and 1.2% for wastewater. So if you didn't have wastewater, let's just say you only have water rates, then we would look at that percentage. We'll call it 1.3%. So we would look at your water rates, compare that to your MHI, and just see if you meet that benchmark. So we would look at them individually if that's kind of the way your system is set up.
Thanks, John. Our next question comes from Dax Norton. He is asking, so the less than 10,000 population requirement for WPCLF, is it still in place, but Ohio EPA might consider a special circumstance principal forgiveness for communities larger than 10,000? Or are communities larger than 10,000 in population automatically eligible if they meet disadvantaged criteria? John, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know it's complicated. It's a lot of information. It's kind of a big change, but communities would need to meet the affordability criteria, regardless of size, to kind of have a shot at principal forgiveness. What we intend to do is kind of make a programmatic decision. So, some money would be available to large communities. There would be an opportunity, perhaps, for some portion of our capitalization grant to be available to large communities, and some portion of the capitalization grants would be available to small communities. So the caps are still there. It would just kind of direct you on which pot you're competing for these limited principal forgiveness dollars. And like I mentioned briefly, we might be looking at more specific projects for larger communities. That's something we'll kind of unveil and get input from our stakeholders in the coming months.
Our next question is from Susan Lowe, and she's asking, do you anticipate taking additional nominations for the drinking water-based supplemental program for 2022? Do either one of you want to take that?
John, you want to take that one?
Sure. And, it's a lot of information, again, just for all these timelines and when you're applying for what. So we're going to be finalizing our drinking water program management plan by July 1st. And, what we intend to do is accept nominations for drinking water emerging contaminants and for drinking water lead projects. We anticipate lead projects to be, and probably EC projects too, to be, year round. So if you have those projects, don't hesitate to nominate them, but we're going to make a special effort for you to nominate those projects. Planning design projects, there's planning and design loans. You can nominate those any time of year. And on the wastewater side, you can nominate nutrient reduction projects. But beyond that, I don't think we're going to have another call for nominations for the base and supplemental. Really, what you're going to have in front of you is, the lead service line funding and the emerging contaminant funding is really what we're going to be soliciting nominations for.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Diane Porter, and her question is, is there consideration for stormwater in this bill? Who would like to take that one?
I can take it. And John, if you want to add, that's fine. So the stormwater projects are eligible under the Clean Water SRF program. and they have been for several years. So, you know, when we talk about the Clean Water SRF, it is predominantly for municipal wastewater treatment, but stormwater projects can potentially be eligible. Within the federal infrastructure bill, it didn't really change. It neither expanded nor contracted the types of eligible projects. So those are the same. But the short answer to your question is stormwater projects are an eligible type of a project. So, you know, we encourage it. We have funded some stormwater projects, not a lot, but some through our water pollution control loan fund. There is no special designated amounts in the federal infrastructure bill for stormwater or other types of projects. So like there isn't like a pot or a special carve out for stormwater projects, but certainly we'd be interested in talking with anybody that's got stormwater projects that they'd like to implement.
Thanks, Jerry. I think this next one is also for you. It's from James Mahaffey, and he's asking, will any of the supplemental principal forgiveness money be made available to be deployed towards projects that have already received WSRLA or WPCLF loans that are currently loans and are currently in progress?
Yeah, thanks. I think there might have been a similar question that John answered, maybe not. But we once an assistance agreement is in place, and in other words, once we've awarded a loan, we really have no ability to go back and to modify that loan agreement. So I think the short answer to the question is that we really don't have the ability, and we don't anticipate using the supplemental bill funds to modify existing loan agreements.
Thanks, Jerry. Our next question comes from Mike Lippert. He's asking, do communities apply for grants, principal forgiveness specifically, or do we apply for funding and you decide how much is principal forgiveness versus a loan? Who would like to take that question?
I can take one, Marion. That's a great question. You know, in the past, principal forgiveness is still relatively new. It's been around since 2009. Probably in the early days, we did have our applicants indicate whether they wanted to seek principal forgiveness or not, and we've moved away from that. You know, in the clean water side, we do generate a list of communities who would be eligible for principal forgiveness. You know, if they apply for assistance, if they nominate a project, you know, we would score and rank those projects, and we do determine, you know, the principal forgiveness that would be available to that project, and that's based on things like readiness. It's based on things like your human health. You know, definitely projects that address raw sewage contamination or exposure to humans do tend to kind of float to the top. But you wouldn't need to indicate that. For lead, you know, maybe for these other projects though, you know, we do need you to raise your hands a little higher. So for emerging contaminants and for lead, we do want you to indicate to us, you know, is this addressing an emerging contaminant? Is this addressing lead service lines? But there's nothing special. There's no extra form you need to fill out. You would just apply through our nomination cycles, and we'll give you the best deal that we can.
Thanks, Sean. Our next question is from Stephen Hoy, and he's asking, because Appendix C in USEPA 3.8 memo lists a broad array of financial metrics that states can use to revise their definition of disadvantaged communities, does OEPA plan to issue the proposed revised criteria with some type of explanation of the process it used or an opportunity to comment on the proposed criteria?
Yeah. Hi, Stephen. That's a good question. Appreciate it. There was a great deal of information that US EPA made available in the implementation memo. It is up to the states to decide on how they're going to design their criteria. As long as it has to meet the language of the Safe Drinking Water Act and Clean Water Act, which is to say that the information that US EPA provided was examples, just illustrative examples of some things that they've seen other states do, and they wanted to throw those out as things that states might want to consider. So that's kind of to the maybe the first part of your question. The second part of your question is really good. So, this webinar today is really the very first time where we have kind of shared what some of our thinking is about revising the criteria, and we are always open for comments and questions and dialogue on it. At some point here in the coming weeks or so, we will be issuing a draft program management plan for the drinking water program. We would anticipate that there will be language in there that talks about the revisions, the changes, the criteria. Certainly people can comment on that at that time. They don't have to wait. Anyone can look at like what we have down now. It's in the slides. That what we have in our slides and what we're trying to share with everybody is our current thinking. So we would love to have a dialogue with folks. And this brings up a point. This would kind of be the end of my answer here, Jesse and Mary, if you're getting ready for the next question. But we do get the question a lot, like when can I comment? When can I comment? And I like to tell people we're open for comments year round. There's no closed season on comments. And so please, we use comments, questions, and feedback from people that helps us to form our programs, and it gives us great ideas of moving forward. So there really isn't a closed period on comments. That being said, there is a formal comment period that goes along with each one of the intended use plans for the drinking water program and for the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund. So, feel free to comment on the metrics that we used and any additional ideas that you have.
Thanks, Jerry. I think this next, was it my turn or your turn?
No, you're fine, Mary. I was just going to make one announcement, kind of piggyback off of Jerry. So just as John and Jerry mentioned, there will probably be specific comment or email addresses when we announce that we will be opening up those periods for comment period. But again, as Jerry mentioned, if you have comments on things that have already been released, again, that infrastructure funding at Ohio, at epa.ohio.gov, feel free to email those and contact that. Again, that goes directly to John and Jerry's staff as well as them, and they will review those. So just if you're wondering where to send those, that's a good email address to send the comments to.
And I did put that email address up there on the screen, so you should be able to see it. All right. Our next question, I think, is for Jerry as well, and it's coming from Alan Brown. Will the program management plan for WSRLA that comes out in May or June indicate if a project is planned for emerging contaminants or lead service line funding, even though those dollars will not be available until September to December range?
Good question. Alan, it's always good to hear from you. It was a long time collaborator. Thank you for the question, Alan. Very good. John, I believe the intention is to have a separate emerging contaminant list and a separate lead service line list in the draft program management plan that you anticipate issuing later on in May, correct?
That's correct, Alan. We mentioned we're going to be trying to apply for the lead service line grant through Bill a little earlier. So we'll have a pretty healthy list of projects on the lead list. The list for emerging contaminants is going to be a little smaller. Certainly people that have identified those EC projects, they'll be on a list. We might not just be ready to apply for that capitalization grant, but we will have these kind of buckets or different lists within our program management plans.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. The next question is from Joe Hadley, and he's asking, will the lead service line, will the lead line replacement be all the way to the citizen's house or just in the right of way? John,
yeah, great question. Yeah, I'll take that one. Great question, Joe. I think I mentioned this earlier, but you will have to replace the entire lead service line, so both public and private side. Even on private property, basically up to the meter. We're not talking about internal plumbing, but up to the meter, in a homeowner's home if it's inside the house. It's not been as challenging as we think. Or as we thought. We've been administering about $20 million in principal forgiveness over the last 2 years. And a lot of our small communities and even large communities, they have found ways to engage the public and let people know about the dangers of lead and be able to remove both the public and private lead service line. So that's our expectation. This is really a requirement from US EPA, is that the entire lead service line is replaced with that funding.
Thanks, John. Our next question is from Tim Warren. He's asking for clarification on how community size factors into the affordability and disadvantaged community status. John, do you want to take that one as well?
Yeah, good question, Tim. And I'm happy to kind of reiterate this again. As Jerry's mentioned, this is our current thinking. So we've made changes to the affordability criteria. We'll start there. So we've got new affordability criteria for the wastewater side and for the drinking water side. A community would need to meet that criteria. Then we would look at population size. So for the wastewater program, you're either above 10,000 population or below. And if you're disadvantaged in either of those categories, you would have an opportunity to potentially compete for principal forgiveness. So you have to meet the criteria, and then there will be opportunities for these two kind of categories of population size. On the drinking water side, most of the principal forgiveness will still be targeted towards small disadvantaged communities, so under 10,000. However, with lead, any size disadvantaged community has the opportunity to apply for the lead principal forgiveness through the bill. And non-disadvantaged communities that have lead, kind of on a census tract data, we can look at these small areas at a census tract level and potentially make some principal forgiveness available there as well.
Thanks, John. Our next question is from Edward Logston, and he's asking, with contractors and materials all in low supply, how do you really achieve project readiness? Do one of you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure, Ed, great question again. Certainly we're aware. We've been hearing from, our borrowers, our colleagues at US EPA, other state SRF programs. We're aware of the supply chain issues, material shortages, and, putting that aside, there are things you can do to get your project ready. When we're going through our process, we have to do environmental reviews, we do financial reviews, we do engineering reviews. So to the best of your ability to kind of get your project ready, get your permitting done, engage us to do environmental reviews. That's kind of where we are. So, engage your public. There are things you can do prior to actually bidding a project to what we consider being ready. So we'll work with you and all of our other applicants out there to kind of address the issues kind of associated with the supply chain and materials and labor shortages out there.
Thanks, John. And I think this kind of feeds off of that question a little bit. This comes from Joe Hadley. He's asking, what help do communities and counties typically need in preparing a successful application?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we're certainly happy to engage people that have nominated projects. We're happy to engage people before they've nominated projects and give you some hands-on assistance. For any small communities out there, we rely a lot on the Rural Community Assistance Program, or RCAP. They are out there to kind of hold hands and help people that might not be familiar with how to get a project kind of from conception to funded and constructed. So we're happy to put any applicant or borrower, interested party, kind of in touch with the right people to walk them through our process, or put you in touch with RCAP or other technical assistance providers to kind of get your program or your project kind of on the right path.
Thanks, John. Our next question is, can you explain further the, under 50% population increase standard? This is from Matthew Pierre. I don't know which one of you guys would like to take that one.
I can take that one. And that requirement, Matthew, comes kind of directly from the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act is pretty prescriptive on the types of things we need to look at for our affordability criteria. And one of those things is population trends. So they say you have to look at population trends as part of your affordability criteria, and we do. That's the factor we've been using for over 5 or 6 years is population trend. So if a community is very rapidly growing, that can be seen as a sign of a very healthy or affluent community. So that's what we have, is less than 50% population increase is one of our affordability criteria.
Thanks, John. I think this next one is for you, and it's a clarification, so you might have mentioned this already. It's coming from Chris Bausch. Please verify and confirm that the disadvantaged community criteria is a mandatory requirement for principal forgiveness.
Yeah, it's a really good question. For Bill, 100% it is a requirement for principal forgiveness. So the Bill dollars, these 5 CAP grants we've been talking about for lead, for our supplemental drinking water and wastewater, the disadvantaged community criteria and affordability criteria are required. It's a little different for the emerging contaminants on the drinking water side. At least 25% or 25% of that pot needs to be directed to disadvantaged communities. With our normal, annual SRF allocations for clean water and for drinking water, we sometimes have a little more flexibility just due to the way that funds are appropriated by Congress. But for Bill, by and large, the money does need to go to disadvantaged communities, with the exception of some of the PFAS or emerging contaminant drinking water money.
John, great answer. If I could just jump in because everything you said was correct, but just to add, Chris, there's a slide that addresses just this point. So if you look in the handouts, the PowerPoint presentation, I've got a slide in there. So, the disadvantaged community status is definitely tied to principal forgiveness for 3 out of the 5 pots. So the clean water and drinking water supplemental, as John said, and the drinking water lead service line. With the clean water emerging contaminants, there is not that restriction. And with the drinking water emerging contaminants, 25% of those funds have to go to either disadvantaged or population under 25,000. Everything John said is correct, but there's a slide on that. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you both. Next question is from Steve DeFranco, and Steve is asking, can the lead service line funding be applied to address a main line replacement and a lead service line replacement? Can it be applied to the cost of the entire main on a street that has 20 lead service lines, so that the cost would include the lead service line and the main replacement? John, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. Hi, Steve. Good to hear from you. So as we mentioned, and hopefully you picked up on, the money coming from the Bill lead service line grant, that's going to be specifically for lead service lines. Well, we have opportunity to fund you, fund the main project. That principal forgiveness is really directed towards the lead service line on the public and private side. So certainly you could have a project where you're getting SRF loans, for the entire project, but that principal forgiveness, if you qualify as a disadvantaged community, would really be available only for the service line on the public and private side.
Thanks, John. This next question I think is for Jerry. It comes from Tim Warren. Do you have the ability to consider a project service area as opposed to the overall community when considering affordability disadvantaged community status?
I'm going to ask John to help with this one. So John, I think that we do. I think that we have the ability to look at the overall service area, but I want to turn this over to you.
We do. And, on the wastewater side, we're typically looking at, as I mentioned, city, village, the actual census data and that geographical location. Where we might be looking more at the service area on the wastewater side would be sewer and water districts, since they've got a very wide area that might not be well defined by a geographic entity. On the drinking water side, service area is really reflected by their user base. So, we might have users in an outside area. On the drinking water side, we're really still looking at the data of that geographical entity. So maybe it's the city or the village, but we're looking at the population for the entire service area. If there's a project, Tim, you've got specific questions on or some sort of example, we're happy to talk to you offline about that.
Thanks, John. The next question is from M. Tucker, and they're asking, any estimate on when we can expect guidance on the implementation of the BABA requirements? Jerry, you want to take that one?
Sure. Good question. Great question. So BABA is that refers to the Build America, Buy America Act, which was kind of sewn into the bipartisan infrastructure law. So it is a program requirement. When you hear that, what it's referring to is what we call domestic preference requirement. So essentially, it's the requirement that these projects use materials that are from or sourced or in the United States. So it's a new requirement, and with it comes a lot of complexity regarding the implementation of these projects and the availability of products and how are we going to do all this. So that's at the heart of this question from M. Tucker. And so the Federal Office of Management and Budget issued some guidance early last week. I believe it was last Monday. That guidance was really written more to the federal agencies. And in that guidance, I haven't done a deep dive in it, but they essentially are putting it on the federal agencies like US EPA to develop their own guidance and to develop their own waiver processes and things like that. So to answer the question, what we hope is that we're going to get some indication from US EPA within the next few weeks about kind of how some of the thoughts are leaning here. I'm not sure that it will be a comprehensive guidance document, but what we really need here is some early indication from US EPA about how these requirements are going to come down. We anticipate that there will be waivers that are available. We would anticipate that the process will be somewhat like the AIS, the American Iron and Steel waiver process. So sit tight and let's just see what becomes available in just the next couple of weeks.
Jerry,
Thanks,
I guess.
Jerry. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Mary, because we had one question that was very similar to this. And again, it sounds like we might not actually know the answer yet, but is the Buy America Act, are those requirements necessary to receive funding from the infrastructure bill? Just to clarify.
They are. They are, and it, you know, for what it's worth, the BABA, the BABA domestic procurement requirements apply to all funding under the federal infrastructure bill, not just the water and the wastewater. So it is a requirement that we at the state level are obliged to pass on to the borrowers.
Thanks, Jerry, and thanks, Jesse. I see that one came in a little bit later. I think our next question is for John, and it comes from John Sullivan. He is asking, can an eligible community receive more than 49% principal forgiveness for a project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So 49%, you know, that percentage, that's kind of coming out of what we're receiving these grants from US EPA. And if you look at just a typical year for our drinking water or wastewater programs, you know, the number we floated earlier was $35 million a year. On the wastewater side, we've been making about $25 million available to, you know, wastewater projects, whether they're kind of municipal wastewater projects or regionalization projects. And we actually have a cap. So we have a cap of $4 million. And sometimes that is all of a project. And sometimes maybe it's a portion of the project. But definitely, you know, it can be more than 49%. I don't think for most of the funding you're going to be very prescriptive like that. You know, it just depends what those caps are on a per project basis. And certainly for drinking water, for the lead projects at least, it might be more of a percentage on what you're receiving for lead service line replacement. There could be kind of a specific breakdown on how much is grant and how much is loan for those individual lead service line projects.
Just quickly, we did get a comment in from Tim Warren clarifying his question about the service areas within a community. He wanted to clarify that he was talking about smaller service areas within a community. I don't know if that changes the response, but I just wanted to give you that information.
Yeah, I think where it really comes in, Tim, is just the ability to look at census tracts. We're not really looking at subservice areas within an entity. You know, we're looking at that borrower. We're looking at their determination. You know, looking at their census data to make those determinations whether they meet the affordability criteria or disadvantaged community. You know, the only time we're looking at a subservice area is really for those lead projects on a census tract for non-disadvantaged communities, and potentially on the water and wastewater side for regionalization projects, where maybe a borrower is doing a project on behalf of a smaller disadvantaged community. But by and large, we're not looking at subservice areas of a community.
Thank you.
I think our next question is from Nathan Zuig, and he's asking, what is the best way to get started with this application process if you have a rehabilitation project design that is near complete? Not sure which one of you guys would like to take that one.
Yeah, I can take it, Nathan. I think the best way is reach out to us, and we will put you in touch with staff to get you into the pipeline. I think we've laid out the timelines for when we're going to have these specific nomination periods. So it sounds like with your design nearly complete, you're looking for construction projects. So we want some more details on what your project is, and we'll direct you, to get your project in queue and get you consideration for these dollars.
Can I piggyback on that? That's a great question. And, sometimes the most basic questions are really the best. So for anyone else that might be in that same boat, like, I don't know where to get started. I've never been through this process. How do I get started? Who do I talk to? I would say, pop your questions, your comments, your contact information into an email to our dedicated email inbox, as Jesse said, infrastructurefunding@epa.ohio.gov, and we'll try to take it from there. So if you don't know what to do next, you're confused, you've got questions, that'll be a good go-to place, and we'll try to walk you through it from there.
Thanks, Jerry. And this one is coming from Tim Warren as well. He is asking what project planning information is required for a WSRLA lead service line replacement project nomination. Not sure if that's something that maybe he should send to that email or not.
Yeah, that's fine to send to the email. I think I can kind of speak to it a little bit, Tim. We do have a fact sheet. So I mentioned we've been running a lead service line replacement funding program for about 2 years now, and we've got some experience with it and know what you need to look for. As far as planning goes, public engagement is going to be very important. We want to make sure the public's been engaged and understands, that the dangers of lead and how this project will work. We want to see the authority to actually be on private property, since that's going to be a requirement of this program. But we can send you the fact sheet. We do have this information on our website. Certainly, you can reach out to us or to the infrastructure funding website. But you will, the project itself, it would be kind of design, bid, and build, just like you would a normal project. It's just how we kind of tease out those lead costs and make sure the project is ready to go.
Thank you.
Sean, the next question is from Joseph Schuster, and he is asking, upon the closeout of a project, how are any remaining program funds returned, and how does that impact the process?
So I can take a crack at that one if I think I understand that question. So when we award financial assistance to applicants, we award a loan, if you will, and the way that the funds flow is by reimbursement, right? So it's not like we don't cut a check to a community for the entire project amount up front, like $5 million. Instead, the community starts to implement the project. They incur costs. They submit the invoices to us, and the program pays out. So we are not in a situation where we have kind of overpaid or awarded too much funds out there, and those funds have to come back. So on a project by project basis, that shouldn't occur where we've got more money out than can justify the project costs. There could be on our end, on John's end of administering these programs, there will be, and it will be invisible to all of the applicants, but like we will have the obligation to be tracking all of these individual awards and making sure that we can document for US EPA that they add up to the totals, and that we've hit the mark on our mandatory principal forgiveness You know, if there were any remaining funds, like if we were administering, you know, one of these grants during a year, and if there were funds somehow that were still unobligated, I mean, we would look for additional projects to obligate them. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I think that the next one goes to you as well, Jerry. The question is coming from, sorry, it keeps jumping up on me. This is from Tim Warren as well. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. This is from Lincoln Frey, and he is asking, could closed landfill leachate sewer projects fall under the WPCLF?
Short answer is yes. They could potentially. The Clean Water SRF in Ohio, the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, I mean, we can potentially fund a wide variety of projects that include point sources and non-point sources. Landfill leachate is a potentially eligible project. So if you've got something in mind, like reach out to us and let's talk about it. You know, sometimes for projects like that, the devil is in the details. If they're, you know, assuming that there is a loan amount, then there has to be a dedicated source to repay that loan amount. But, you know, the short answer to your question, Lincoln, and it's a great question, is yeah, it's potentially eligible.
John, I think this next question is for you. It's from Liana Soderweg. And again, I apologize for any names that I mispronounced today. But she's just asking, just to confirm, a community with financial hardships who has a greater population than the 10,000, let's say 13,000, can qualify for principal forgiveness for wastewater project now?
Yeah, great question. We're happy to repeat this because it is new, and we are proposing, you know, a new affordability criteria that would have opportunities for larger communities to potentially compete for principal forgiveness. You know, what we haven't identified yet is dollar amounts, so we don't know how much money would be available. Caps, we don't know how, like, propose a cap yet for a per project basis or types of projects that might qualify. So there might be even some further restrictions and you know, on top of those principal forgiveness awards and certainly caps, you know, on a per project basis. But yes, you know, we are proposing some amount of principal forgiveness could be available to large communities who meet the affordability criteria.
Thank you. Our next one comes from, sorry, I'm scrolling back up. Jesse, do you want to do it if you're on the right spot?
No, you're fine. Our next one comes from Tim Warren. And John, I think this is another one for you. It's can lead service line verification and replacement be performed as a single project? For example, the community would replace what it identifies as it goes.
Yeah, it's a good question, Tim. I think we probably see them as different projects. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about replacement of lead service lines on private and public property, but we definitely want people to nominate projects for mapping and identification as well. We've been working, you know, through the SRF programs already to provide funding for mapping and identification, as well as through the H2 Ohio program. We've done some mini grants for communities to map and inventory their lead service lines. So it's not to say it couldn't happen, Tim, but I kind of see it as maybe separate projects, but certainly there could be opportunities. We don't have any program guidelines yet, but there could be opportunities for principal forgiveness, maybe for mapping and inventorying, as well as for lead service lines for disadvantaged communities, but maybe two projects. You know, we've got 5 years, so we'll kind of learn as we go, and, you know, certainly welcome your feedback as we roll these programs out.
Thanks, John. Our next question comes from Kevin Ebby. He is asking, can ARP funds be used to pay back the loan portion? I'm not sure who would like to take that one.
I'll take it. So for those of you not familiar, ARP, I believe ARP in this context refers to the American Rescue Plan. which was another federal act that passed right this time last year, in which a lot of funding was made available to both state and local governments. And one of the eligible uses of the funds was for water and wastewater infrastructure. To the commenter, we would love to talk with you about it. I think that in the case of, like, if we were to award a loan, like if a local government had ARP funds, those would probably just be applied to that project, like upfront, and the amount of the loan would just be reduced commensurately. So I don't know that ARP funds would really be used to repay one of the loans moving forward. If the question pertains to a loan that we've already awarded, I think the answer to that is probably no, for the same reason that we can't take bill infrastructure money and apply it to already awarded projects.
Thanks, Jerry. I think the next question is for John, from Susan Shell. Susan is asking, with these new IIJA funds, is there any thought about offering rate discounts on the portions not eligible for principal forgiveness?
Hi,
John,
Susan.
would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I can take this one. Good to hear from you, Susan. Certainly, it's something we are thinking long and hard about, is discounts. We mentioned how much principal forgiveness is available, compared to the pool of projects we fund each and every year. And, we kind of rely on our programmatic focus areas, at the state level and at a DPA level, but, what our borrowers are seeing too. We've offered combined sewer overflow discounts, nutrient reduction discounts, harmful algal bloom discounts. There could be new discounts, certainly. That's something we would welcome input from our audience here and stakeholders, but that's something we are looking into.
Thanks, Sean. Our next question comes from Stephanie Kiefer, and Stephanie's asking, will there be any special or additional administrative requirements for the federal bill programs? Jerry, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think the short answer to that is no, there won't be any. I'm going to give kind of a two-part answer. So because of the way the funds are flowing, and they're flowing through the state revolving fund programs, there really isn't any additional federal requirements through the SRF program. So the first part of the answer is no, but then there is a caveat, right? And the caveat is the Build America, Buy America Act that we talked about previously. So that is a new federal requirement that will kind of come down and be superimposed on the SRF programs. Now, Stephanie, if you're unfamiliar with some of the SRF programs, the existing structure, there is some federal requirements that have been built into the SRF programs and have been there for years, right? Like there is a requirement for federal wage rates, and there is a goal of minority and women's business enterprise participation. So there are some federal requirements that have historically been already built into the SRF programs. But for anyone that has experience with the SRFs, there really isn't going to be a lot of new federal requirements overlaying over the bill funds.
Thanks, Jerry. Our next question comes from Tim Warren. He's asking, how does readiness to proceed factor into the priority ranking? Will readiness to proceed impact the principal forgiveness project selection? John, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, good question, Tim. Probably good for everybody. So readiness to proceed is kind of a newer focus area for us. We've got a lot more principal forgiveness demand than we have dollars available. That's been the case for many, many years. For both programs, we do some scoring based on water quality. So kind of your wastewater water quality impacts and your drinking water quality impacts. That's usually the first score. We rank projects from high to low, and then readiness to proceed can kind of help almost serve as a tiebreaker. So it does impact our projects competing for principal forgiveness. And we certainly, have an opportunity over the next couple of years to get people more ready to proceed, through some of the offerings we anticipate having through the programs. So, first you've got your water quality score, and then we look at readiness and other factors to kind of score our principal forgiveness contenders.
Thanks, John. Our next question comes from Sarah Affronti. And Sarah's asking, specific to lead service line funds, with the current formula that states the states that have the most lines and have the biggest need are receiving relatively few dollars per line. Midwestern and Eastern cities have a significantly higher amount of lead service lines as compared to Western states. Ohio has the second largest number of lead service lines per state, but will be receiving the least amount of dollars per lead service line. With regard to allocation formulas, has there been any suggestions or discussions by Ohio EPA to the federal level on updating the formula for how funds are distributed to the state for equity and need?
Yeah, I'll take that. That's a good question. So I'm going to reiterate the question for those that maybe didn't catch it all. Lead service lines are all throughout the United States, but they're not necessarily evenly distributed throughout the United States. And the commenter is pointing to the fact that information seems to indicate that Ohio has maybe more lead service lines than proportionally than other parts of the country. That being said, the funding that we're getting from the bill is by the allotment formula, the standard allotment formula for the drinking water SRF. So to the commenter, Sarah, your comment is taken, and we have recognized that the distribution of the funding is kind of standard, and it's not lead service line specific. Any change in how those funds are going to be allotted will have to occur by Congress. So, actually even US EPA does not have the authority to make a change in the allotment formula, nor of course, does the state of Ohio. So if there were to be a change, it would need to occur on the federal level through an act of Congress. With that being said, we are appreciative of the funds that Ohio will be getting. We are anxious to start working with public water systems to, really dive into inventory, mapping, and replacements. We're going to have access to $350 million over the next 5 years, so we're happy about that. If there were to be a change enacted by Congress that would provide Ohio with even more funds, we would accept those funds and go to town. But for right now, what we're really trying to do is encourage public water systems to take advantage of what we have available. And if they need to access funds for inventory, mapping, and certainly those that are ready to go to replacement projects, dive in.
Thanks, Jerry. We did have a question from somebody who is watching this. I'm not sure if they're watching it on their phone or desktop. However, to clarify who's speaking, and they might not see the names, Jerry has glasses and John does not. Our next question is for John from Jenny Hanna. When is the earliest WPCLF project nominated in August 2022 that is selected to receive principal forgiveness to be able to be awarded the funding?
Yeah, great question. The very earliest, our program year runs on the calendar year, so the very earliest would be January. If you were in consideration for principal forgiveness, our program management plan would be final prior to January 1. And, we issue loans each and every month except for the month of November. So the earliest is January, but, it takes some time to develop a project, unless your project is like ready to bid or being bid, in late 2022. Odds are it'd probably go, in the spring. We typically see projects going spring, summer, fall. So the earliest, just by the way our program is structured, would be January. but typically it would be more likely to be mid-year. And that's just based on, your readiness and bids, getting acceptable bids and things of that nature.
Our next question is from Rebecca Hughes. Rebecca is asking, as a district, we serve well over 10,000 residents. However, the total population of a project area may be well under the number. Is the population number based on those benefiting from the project?
Yeah, I can take that question, Rebecca. Good question. We kind of talked about looking at maybe water and sewer districts on a case-by-case basis. They tend to be structured a little bit differently. And, if you're looking at maybe a sub area, there could be some opportunity to look at that for a water and sewer district. Really, I mean, I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here. You really have to be a project that's assessing. We have to be sure those costs are being really attributed to that area. We'd be happy to talk about that with you offline just to see what you're looking at and if we can be a better service to give you guidance on how to apply and where you might fit in with these areas.
Thanks, John. Our next question is from Tim Warren. He is asking, will you have the ability to change affordability and disadvantaged community status criteria from 1 year to another over the 5 years? Is the BIL, the 5 years of the BIL funding? John, would you like to take that?
Yeah, Tim, thank you for asking the questions that everybody else probably has too. We can, we do intend to, be responsive to the affordability criteria, and we have the ability to make changes from year to year. Certainly, if we do make changes, they would be broadcast and publicized and, subject to public review and comment. So if we were to make changes, it would be a very open process, but we can. We haven't made changes in quite a while, so this is probably the most substantial change we made, and since the criteria were established. But we can, short answer, make changes over the 5 years.
Thanks, John. Our next question is from Rick Brown, and Rick is asking, can any of the funds or loans be applied for wastewater facilities that require upgrades to keep in compliance now in the future? Excuse me. Upgrades to keep it compliant now or in the future. Sorry about that.
Absolutely. Sure. So yeah, thanks for the question, Rick. And this is a great question because, maybe we kind of blow by some of this stuff that is so common. So one of the biggest, frankly, the biggest grant that the state is going to get each year is going to come into our Clean Water SRF as a supplemental grant. That is the biggest one out of the 5 different grants. And with that money, we can use those funds for any eligible Clean Water SRF project. So, we talk a lot in this webinar, and we've been focusing in on emerging contaminants and lead service lines a lot. But there's going to be a tremendous amount of money available to the core programs. And so the answer to your question is absolutely. And, this is what these programs do day in and day out, year in and year out, is provide steady source of funding to local governments, public water systems to keep their infrastructure up to date, to keep it compliant, and to expand. So absolutely. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Jerry. Our next question comes from Phyllis Dunlap. She's asking, will projects currently listed on the WPCLF PMP but not yet awarded be eligible for the IIJA principal forgiveness funding? John, would you like to take that?
Yeah, good question, Phyllis. And we briefly touched on this, and we recognized a lot of information. So our plan, what we are looking into for this year is applying for our base grant for the wastewater side. So we're not looking at the IIJA funds for the wastewater program until calendar year 2023. What we are looking at is potentially modifying our current program management plan and applying some of these dollars from that CAP grant towards the existing list. So, there's an opportunity probably for some of these projects to be identified for kind of our regular principal forgiveness, but the IIJA principal forgiveness, that's what we're looking at towards 2023. And, the month of August 2022 is when you would nominate those projects for the IIJA consideration.
Thanks, John. Our next question comes from Scott Moling. He is asking, do you anticipate any revisions to the BABA criteria and streamlining the waiver process in light of the material shortages?
I can take it, John, if you want to add. So the BABA is a federal requirement, and it is one that was part of the infrastructure law. We really have to administer that as we are directed by the federal government. So Ohio EPA does not have the ability we don't have the ability to just modify it. We have to administer it as written. That being said, we, as I said before, like, we understand the situations that local governments can be in, and if there is an instance where a waiver from that is that the project can qualify, the circumstances would qualify, we would be happy to work with the applicant and US EPA to try to get that waiver. But we have to pretty rigidly follow the process.
Thanks, Jerry. Our next question is from Rhonda Boyd, and I think this goes for you, John. She's asking if there is a galvanized service connection or connected with a lead PTL, does the entire service all the way to the meter have to be replaced? If we replaced only the public section, would that still meet the requirements?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're really talking, when we're talking about replacement of the public and private lead service line, there's all sorts of different variations out there. I believe, some of the lead and copper rules and maybe proposed rules, they do speak about galvanized lines downstream of lead. And if that's the case, the whole line, the public and private, even if only half of it is lead and half is galvanized, that could be replaced with these funds. Without looking at we could probably talk about your project offline, Rhonda, but really looking at the entire line, and we would, kind of defer to our partners in Division of Drinking Groundwaters on any regulatory requirements. But we can replace the private public lead service line or galvanized if it's downstream of a lead line, as well as like the restoration. So that is eligible cost would be the restoration of that line.
Thanks, John. I think this. Go ahead, Jerry. Sorry.
Yeah, Mary and Jesse, if you don't mind, I guess I want to kind of go back to Scott's question about the BABA criteria. And maybe I was focusing in on just one particular part of it. But Scott, I think how this plays out and any modifications to kind of like the criteria and the waiver process, I think it remains to be seen. Scott it brought up the idea about material shortages, and I think what we really can't predict is like how pervasive those material shortages are going to be, and how long term they're going to be. So, it is a good question, Scott, and I think that is something that probably US EPA will have to consider. If there is just kind of, I would say extremely pervasive and extremely long-term material shortages, then it may be up to them within kind of a reasonableness to see whether or not a waiver process could be developed for that. So I just kind of wanted to go back and add a little bit to my previous answer.
Thanks, Jerry. John, this one is for you. It comes from Melinda Sproul. Will the disadvantaged communities be identified ahead of the call for nominations?
Yeah, good question, Melinda. We have been doing that on the wastewater side for quite a long time. It's a little more challenging on the drinking water side. We mentioned some of the criteria you have to meet, such as the human health factors. So we'll do our best to kind of let people know who might qualify based on some of the socioeconomic factors. But specifically for like lead and emerging contaminants, if you have those projects, please nominate them. Even if you don't know if you're disadvantaged, we'll work with you. We can let you know as soon as possible whether, what the deal is that you could obtain from us, whether it's a low interest loan or a low interest loan and principal forgiveness. But we will try our best to identify ahead of time who's disadvantaged and who's not.
I think we've come to actually our last question. Before I ask it, I was just going to let everyone know that, again, if you have other further questions or comments, again, that's why we have the contact information on there, the infrastructure funding at epa.ohio.gov. Again, you can keep submitting your questions and, talking to those folks in our staff, and we will be happy to get back to you. But I think this is our last question for this afternoon. And it's from Susan Lowe, and she's asking, do the current loan discounts apply towards the supplemental funding like they have to the base in the past?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, good question, Susan. So, I think that we, for the funds that will be coming, the supplemental funds that will be coming to each of the two programs, right? The supplemental clean water, the supplemental drinking water. We really have to determine how we're going to do that. But I think more importantly, and from kind of an implementation standpoint, at this time, we anticipate continuing to offer the discounts that we are currently offering. And I think, as John indicated in an earlier response, we may be looking at, potential for offering additional discounts. So the programs that you see in place now will continue. The discounts, the structure that is kind of there will continue. I would say, if anything, it may even be expanded.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to again thank Jerry and John both for presenting today and taking all of your questions. I want to thank everybody for attending today and asking some great questions. I know we covered a lot of material, and I'm sure that there might be some questions that pop up in your head after the fact and thinking I should have asked that to John and Jerry when I had the chance. Well, again, that's why we have the contact information that is on the screen. Should you have further questions, that infrastructure funding at epa.ohio.gov. We're going to go ahead and conclude our information session on the water and wastewater funding. We again encourage you to check out our website, our social media, our newsletters for any new announcements on this material. And then also look for, hopefully this summer, we will be having a webinar just for, again, some more updates. And again, another Q&A to allow you to pick John and Jerry's brain. I don't have anything else. I want to see if John or Jerry had any concluding remarks.
Thank you all. We appreciate you sticking with us. It's exciting, the opportunity that we have. What we said before about engagement and really kind of continuing a dialogue, we really and truly mean that. So take a look at the handouts. There's a lot of information there. We want to continue the dialogue, and we want to continue to work with you on your important water and wastewater infrastructure projects. So thanks for coming today.
Yep. Thank you all. And again, we will actually be sending you out. This session was recorded as well as the first one in February. So we will be sending those out to all attendees here today, just so you have that for your records if you want to go back if a question was asked, or if you, again, want to see what they discussed, just not on the slides. So you will be getting that in your email. And again, from Ohio EPA, we thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.